You're not even half the woman my mother is." The words, spoken by my daughter-in-law Valerie, were not shouted. They were delivered with a chilling precision, a quiet blade that sliced through the warm, festive air of my dining room. I had just placed the dessert on the table, a vanilla bean pudding I had stirred for nearly an hour, its surface a perfect, trembling mirror. The aroma of chicken and mushrooms, a recipe passed down from my own mother, still lingered in the air. For a single, suspended moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick marking a beat of my own hammering heart. A profound silence descended, heavy and suffocating, wrapping itself around the three of us. My son, Robert, seated across from me, went entirely pale, his gaze fixed on his plate as if it held the secrets of the universe. He did not look at me. He did not look at his wife. It was in that moment, in his deliberate stillness, that I understood. This was not a spontaneous outburst. This was a planned execution. Without a conscious thought, my body moved. I felt my hand, steady despite the tremor in my soul, push my dining chair back. The scrape of its wooden legs against the polished floor was a deafening shriek in the quiet room. I rose to my feet, my 70-year-old frame feeling taller and stronger than it had in decades. My eyes met Valerie's, and for the first time, I did not see a difficult young woman. I saw a stranger, a cruel interloper sitting at my table, eating my food, breathing my air. A calm, cold wave washed over me, extinguishing the fire of my initial pain. And from that calm, a single sentence emerged, clear and unyielding. "Then she can start paying your rent." Robert's head snapped up. "Rent? What rent?" he yelled, his voice cracking, the carefully constructed facade of composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. His eyes, wide with a mixture of confusion and sheer panic, darted from my face to Valerie's. At that very moment, as the web of deceit began to unravel before my very eyes, I knew my life was about to change forever. This revelation was not an ending. It was the beginning of a story that no one, least of all the two people sitting before me, could ever have seen coming. My name is Shirley. I am 70 years old. And on that fateful night, I learned the devastating lesson that a mother's unconditional love, when left unguarded, can become her greatest, most profound weakness. For 6 long months, I had been the silent, unseen benefactor in their lives. Every single month, on the 3rd day like clockwork, I would walk to my bank and transfer $800 to their landlord, secretly paying the rent for the modern and 2-bedroom apartment where my son and his wife lived. I had convinced myself it was my solemn duty, a mother's sacred obligation, to help her child navigate the treacherous waters of financial hardship. I never once imagined that while I was meticulously sacrificing my life savings, the money I had painstakingly put away penny by penny, they saw me not as a lifeline but as a burden. To them I was someone inferior, a relic from a bygone era whom they could humiliate without consequence in the very home built on the foundations of my love and sacrifice. It had all started 6 months earlier, on a gray, drizzly afternoon. Robert had appeared at my doorstep, his face a mask of despair, tears welling in his eyes. He explained, in a voice choked with emotion, that he had lost his job due to company downsizing. They couldn't make the rent, he'd whispered, and the shame was eating him alive. "Mom, it will only be for a few months, just until I find something new," he had pleaded, using that broken tone that had always been my undoing. The same tone he used as a small boy when he'd scraped his knee or had a nightmare. Like any mother who loves her child more than her own life, I didn't hesitate for a single second. I reached into the savings I had guarded so fiercely, the money earned over a lifetime of working as a seamstress from dawn until well past dusk, and I began paying their rent. I did so without Valerie's knowledge. "It's our secret, Mom," Robert had begged. "I don't want Valerie to feel ashamed about depending on you." How naive I had been. How utterly blind. I believed he was protecting his wife's pride, when in reality, he was meticulously protecting his own fragile image as a provider. While I was at home, carefully counting every dollar, stretching my meager pension to its breaking point to help them, they were living a life of blissful ignorance. They went out to expensive dinners, their smiling faces appearing in photographs on social media. Valerie would post pictures of new clothes, designer shoes, and they even began planning a vacation to a place I knew, with a sinking heart, they could not possibly afford. The dinner that night had been meant to be special. It was the anniversary of my husband Charles's passing, and I wanted to fill the house with life and happy memories. I had spent the entire day in the kitchen, my joints aching, my hands moving with the familiar grace of decades of practice. I cooked his favorite meal, chicken with a creamy mushroom sauce, rice pilaf with fresh vegetables from my small garden, and that vanilla bean pudding he had adored since he was a boy. The table was set to perfection. I used the fine crystal glasses I had inherited from my own mother, their delicate rims catching the light. I polished the sterling silver cutlery that I reserved only for the most special of occasions. Each piece was a testament to a life lived, a history they seemed so eager to dismiss. Valerie had arrived in an elegant, form-fitting red dress, a slash of crimson against the quiet warmth of my home. Her shoes, a pair of heels with impossibly thin straps, likely cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. From the moment they stepped through the door, I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Valerie wore that forced, brittle smile I had come to know so well, the one that always preceded a cutting remark or an act of subtle cruelty. Robert seemed unusually nervous, his eyes avoiding mine, his fingers constantly fidgeting with his phone. Throughout dinner, the conversation was a minefield. Valerie was the lead critic in a play I hadn't agreed to be in. She found fault in everything. The food, she commented, could have been warmer. My home's decor, she suggested with a condescending tilt of her head, was dated. She even criticized the faint scent of lavender from the air freshener in the living room. "Shirley, don't you think it's time you freshened this place up a bit?" she had remarked, her tone dripping with false concern. "My mom's house is so much more modern. She has all those trendy minimalist pieces." I had simply smiled, a tight, practiced expression, determined to maintain a fragile harmony. But inside, a slow burn of irritation was beginning to mount. I had lived in that house for more than 30 years. Every single object held a memory. Every corner told a story. It was my story. When the time for dessert arrived, I had foolishly hoped for a reprieve, a sweet ending to a bitter meal. I had made the pudding with such care, my mind filled with memories of a small Robert, his face smeared with vanilla, telling me with childlike sincerity that I was the best cook in the entire world. But instead of gratitude, instead of a shared moment of warmth, I received those 7 words, each one a thorn that pierced my soul. "You're not half the woman my mother is." The impact was visceral, like a physical slap across the face. I froze, the silver pudding spoon suspended in midair. A lump of pure, unadulterated emotion swelled in my throat, hot and painful. Valerie looked at me with a cruel, triumphant smile, as if she had been waiting all evening for this precise moment to inflict the maximum amount of damage. Robert, my son, lowered his head, his silence a deafening confirmation of his complicity. In that chilling instant, I knew with absolute certainty that he had been a party to his wife's plan. This was not just her cruelty. It was a shared betrayal. "Excuse me?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice a trembling whisper, even though I had heard her with perfect, searing clarity. Valerie leaned back in her chair, a picture of false elegance, as if she were the queen of my castle, and she repeated the words with an even greater, more deliberate cruelty. "You heard me, Shirley. My mother is a successful, independent woman. She built her own empire. She's never needed anyone for anything. She has her own company, a beach house in Florida. She takes trips to Europe whenever she pleases. You just know how to cook and sew." Each word was a hammer blow against my heart. My mind reeled, a flood of images overwhelming me. I thought of all the years I had worked, from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, my fingers raw, my back aching, sewing intricate dresses for Sweet 16 parties, altering suits for nervous grooms, embroidering tablecloths for other people's weddings, all while I never had the chance to plan my own. I remembered the sleepless nights when Robert was small and sick with a fever, my hand cool on his forehead. I remembered selling the few pieces of jewelry I owned, my most prized possessions, to help pay for his college tuition. I remembered working double shifts for an entire year so he could have a reliable car and everything else he needed to succeed. "Valerie, please," Robert muttered, his voice weak, utterly devoid of the strength required to truly defend me. Those 2 words were worse than his silence. They confirmed that he agreed with his wife, that he had been an active participant in this meticulously planned humiliation. My son, the very same boy who had once told me I was his hero, was now allowing me to be treated like a scullery maid in my own home. "No, Robert, let me finish," Valerie continued, her voice rising to that sharp, high-pitched tone she used when she wanted to assert her superiority. "Your mother needs to hear the truth for once. My mother would never have allowed her son to live in this kind of mediocrity." She made a dismissive, sweeping gesture with her hand, indicating my dining room, a room that held the ghosts of countless beautiful memories. She would have helped us get something better. She wouldn't have kept us trapped in poverty with her false kindness. It was at that precise moment that something deep inside me, something that had been dormant for decades, finally snapped. It wasn't just the profound injustice of her words. It was the absolute staggering ingratitude of a person who had been living off my quiet generosity without the slightest inkling of the truth. For 6 months, I had been the one paying for the very roof over their arrogant heads. I had deprived myself of the medication I needed for my arthritis, enduring the throbbing pain in my joints, to ensure they had a comfortable, secure place to live. I rose slowly from my chair, my movements deliberate and measured. An unfamiliar surge of adrenaline, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, coursed through my veins. "All right, Valerie," I said, my voice infused with a calm that surprised even myself. "If your mother is so vastly superior, if she is truly such a better woman than I am, then I believe it is high time for her to assume the responsibilities that a successful woman like her should have." Robert looked at me, his face a canvas of confusion, but Valerie maintained that smug, self-satisfied smile, as if she had just won a decisive battle. "Exactly, Shirley. I'm so glad you finally understand your place in this family." "Oh, I understand my place perfectly," I replied, my voice growing firmer, stronger with each word I spoke. "And my place no longer includes paying the $900 a month for your apartment at 420 Hamilton Street, Unit 3. The silence that followed was so deep, so absolute, that I could hear the gentle whirring of the kitchen clock. Robert shot up from his chair so abruptly that he knocked over his water glass, the crystal shattering on the floor, a sound that echoed the breaking of our family. "What rent?" he yelled again, his eyes wide with disbelief, looking at me as if I had suddenly started speaking in a foreign language. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Valerie's arrogant smile had completely vanished, wiped clean from her face. Now she stared at me with a cocktail of terror and confusion that, I must admit, gave me a profound and immense sense of satisfaction. "The rent I have been religiously paying every single month since February," I continued, savoring every syllable, every second of their shared bewilderment. $900 that is electronically withdrawn from my bank account on the 5th of every month, plus the $100 in additional fees the landlord charges for a direct deposit from a third party. $1,000 in total. $1,000 that I pay so you can live comfortably while you sit in my home and disrespect me. Robert collapsed back into his chair as if his legs could no longer support his weight. "But you told me you talked to the landlord, that he was giving you time to get the money together," he stammered, his voice broken, the lies catching in his throat. Valerie looked at him with a fury I had never witnessed before, a white-hot rage, as if he alone were to blame for the spectacular implosion of her moment of glory. "I lied," I admitted without a single hint of remorse. "I lied because I thought I was helping my son. I thought the situation was temporary. I thought that one day you would appreciate the sacrifice I was making, but now I see the truth. To you, I am just a silly old woman who deserves to be humiliated." Valerie tried to regain her composure, to salvage some shred of her former arrogance, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "Shirley, I didn't know you. Robert never told me that you were the one paying," she began to stutter, her words tumbling over one another. But I interrupted her, raising my hand in a gesture that commanded silence. "I am not interested in your excuses, my dear. If your mother is as wonderful and successful as you claim, I am certain she will be more than happy to take on this financial responsibility. After all, a woman so accomplished and independent wouldn't have any problem paying for her daughter and son-in-law's rent, now would she?" The irony in my voice was so thick, so palpable, that even Robert flinched. The atmosphere in the dining room had become so dense you could cut it with a knife. Valerie's eyes darted back and forth between Robert and me, her mind clearly racing, calculating the devastating implications of what she had just discovered. Robert's hands were trembling, and beads of sweat had begun to form on his forehead. "Mom, why didn't you tell me the truth?" he finally asked, his voice cracking with a mixture of shame and desperation. "Why did you let me believe you had worked something out with the landlord?" Robert's question echoed in the tense silence of the dining room, like a painful admission of his own willful ignorance. "I lied because you are my son, Robert. Because when you came to my house that day, crying, telling me you had lost everything and didn't even have money for food, I couldn't bear to stand by and watch the boy I raised, the man I love more than my own life, suffer." Valerie remained silent, but I could see the frantic calculations in her eyes as she processed the full scope of my revelation. The delicate pink blush from her expensive makeup had drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking ashen and frail. Robert ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood, a telltale sign of his fear and anxiety. "I lied," I continued, my voice growing firmer, each word a stone being laid in the foundation of my new resolve. "Because I believed it was temporary. I believed that once you had recovered financially and found a stable job, you would thank me. I never for a single moment imagined that while I was depriving myself of the medication for my arthritis, while I had stopped buying meat to save those $900 a month, the two of you were sitting in your comfortably paid-for apartment, plotting how to humiliate me in my own home." Robert tried to interrupt, to offer some feeble excuse, but I raised my hand to silence him. "No, now it is your turn to listen to me, Robert. For the past 6 months, I have been eating rice and eggs for dinner almost every single night. I have been wearing the same pair of worn-out shoes, the soles cracked and thinning, because I did not have the money for new ones. Do you know what I did last week, Robert? I sold your father's wedding ring. That simple gold band, the one I had kept as my most prized and sacred treasure, I sold it just to make sure I could pay your rent on time and have a little food left over in my own refrigerator." Tears finally welled up in my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were hot, bitter tears of rage. I sold the only physical memory I had left of my husband, of the man who had loved and cherished me for 30 years, to support a couple who considered me inferior, mediocre, and utterly unworthy of even the most basic respect. Valerie finally found her voice, though it was now small and shaky, a pale imitation of her earlier arrogance. "Surely I didn't know. Robert never told me that you were the one paying." But I cut her off with a look so sharp it could have melted steel. "Of course you didn't know, my dear, because your husband chose to lie to you as well. He preferred for you to believe that he had somehow managed to secure your lifestyle on his own, rather than admit the humiliating truth that he was completely dependent on his mediocre mother." I spat out the word mediocre with such venom that Valerie physically recoiled in her chair. Robert finally exploded. "Mom, I never wanted it to be this way. You insisted on helping. I never asked you to sacrifice so much for us." His voice was desperate, like a child caught in a lie, but his words only fueled the inferno of my fury. "I insisted?" I yelled, my composure finally shattering, the calm facade crumbling away to reveal the raw pain beneath. "You came to my house sobbing like a 5-year-old boy. You told me you couldn't even afford a loaf of bread, that Valerie was crying every single night from the shame of not being able to pay the bills. What kind of mother would I have been if I had closed my door on you in your time of need?" The silence that followed his outburst was devastating. Robert looked at Valerie with an expression of pure reproach, a look she returned with equal intensity. It was blindingly clear that their marriage was a house of cards, built on a foundation of secrets and lies, and that neither of them had been completely honest with the other. "You know what hurts the most, Robert?" I continued, feeling the tears streaming down my wrinkled cheeks, tracing pathways of sorrow. "It's not the money, it's not even the sacrifice. It's the fact that for all these months, every time you came to visit, every time you sat at my table, I saw the contempt in your eyes. Valerie criticized my house, my food, my clothes, my very way of being, all the while not knowing that it was my money that was paying for the roof over her head. And you? You just stood there and let her do it. You said nothing." Robert tried to approach me, to place a comforting hand on my arm, but I took a sharp step back. "Mom, please just let me explain." "There is nothing left to explain." I cut him off sharply, my voice like ice. "The explanation was delivered just a few moments ago. Your wife believes I am not half the woman her mother is. Well, then her mother can now demonstrate what kind of woman she truly is by taking care of her responsibilities. Valerie finally found a sliver of courage, though her voice still trembled. Surely, my words were. They were said in a moment of. I was upset about other things. I interrupted her with a short, bitter laugh. You were upset about having to eat a meal in the home of the woman who pays your rent. Upset because you had to pretend to be cordial with someone you consider so profoundly inferior. The tension in the air was so dense, so heavy, it felt as though the very walls of the room were closing in on us. Robert paced the dining room like a caged animal, his agitation palpable, while Valerie sat twisting a cloth napkin between her trembling hands. Do you know what the saddest part of all of this is? I continued, feeling a strange, almost out-of-body calm settle over me. I really believed we were a family. When I married your father, Robert, I dreamed of having many children, of having grandchildren running through this very house, of family dinners filled with laughter and love. After years of trying to get pregnant, when you finally came along, I thought God had bestowed upon me the greatest gift in the entire world. Robert stopped his pacing and looked at me, his eyes now filled with his own tears. Mom, I love you. You know I love you. Love isn't just words, son. Love is actions. It's respect. It's protection. When your wife insults me and you remain silent, that is not love. When you allow her to humiliate me in my own home, that is not love. When you lie to me to hide the fact that you are financially dependent on me, that is convenience. Valerie stood up abruptly, her chair screeching back as she did. That's enough. I am not going to stand here and listen to this sermon any longer. Robert, we are leaving. Now. Her voice had regained some of its familiar arrogance, a defensive shield she threw up in moments of panic, but I could clearly see the fear in her eyes. No, Robert said firmly, his tone surprising both of us. We are not leaving until we sort this out. Mom, please, sit down. We need to talk about this like adults. But I had already made my decision. There is nothing left to talk about, Robert. The cards are all on the table. Your wife has made her feelings about me crystal clear, and by your silence you have shown that you agree with her. Starting tomorrow morning, I will be calling your landlord and informing him that I will no longer be paying your rent. If Valerie's mother is as superior as she claims, I am sure she will find a way to help you. But Mom, you can't do that, Robert cried out, and for the first time all night, I saw real, unadulterated terror in his eyes. We don't have the money. I was fired 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you after dinner. Robert's words hit the dining room like a second bomb, its shockwave even more devastating than the first. You were fired 2 weeks ago? I repeated slowly, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me, so potent it almost made me sick. And you didn't tell me anything. You sat here tonight, you allowed your wife to humiliate me, knowing full well that you were completely and utterly dependent on me. My voice broke on the last word, not from sadness but from a rage so profound, so deep, that my hands began to shake uncontrollably. Valerie turned on Robert, her eyes blazing with a furious fire. What? You were fired 2 weeks ago and you didn't tell me? I have been spending money as if everything were perfectly normal while you— She couldn't finish the sentence. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob, a dramatic, theatrical performance worthy of an actress in a soap opera. Valerie, please, just let me explain, Robert began, his voice pleading. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. Just yesterday, I bought those $400 shoes. Last week, I booked the spa for my birthday party. Robert, we are broke, and you let me spend like an absolute idiot. Her tears had completely ruined her carefully applied makeup, and now she looked exactly like what she was, a desperate, terrified woman stripped of her pretensions. I watched the surreal scene unfold before me, feeling a strange and unsettling mix of satisfaction and profound pain. For months, I had silently carried the heavy weight of supporting this couple, and now, finally, they were being forced to confront the harsh reality of their situation. Robert looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped, his face buried in his hands. You know what the most pathetic part of all this is, Robert? I said, my voice infused with that same surprising calm. Even now, after discovering that you have been lying to me and humiliating me, my first instinct is still to ask if you need help. That is what a mother does, son. That is what unconditional love does. Robert looked up at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares, his eyes wide with fear and seeking comfort. Mom, I lost my job because I was late 3 times in a row. Valerie had been sick, and I had to take care of her, take her to the doctor, and Valerie cut him off with a murderous glare. I was not sick. I had appointments with my dermatologist for my beauty treatments. Do not use me as an excuse for your own irresponsibility. The mask had fallen away completely. The elegant, superior woman who had arrived at my house hours earlier had vanished, revealing someone vulgar, selfish, and utterly desperate. Beauty treatments? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. Are you telling me that my son lost his job because he had to take you to your beauty treatments while I was selling my husband's wedding ring to pay for your roof? A laugh, so bitter it scared even me, escaped my throat. Robert approached me again, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes. I know I failed you, but you can't abandon us now. We have nowhere else to go. Valerie's parents are in Europe, and Valerie interrupted him again, her voice sharp. My parents are not in Europe. They are in town. You told me to tell you we were fine so they wouldn't worry. One lie after another was being peeled back, like the layers of a rotten onion. And just how many jobs have you lost, Robert? I asked, my voice so low I could barely hear it myself. How many times have you lied to me about this? The silence that followed was deafening. Robert couldn't look me in the eye, and Valerie had started to sob again, but this time her tears seemed more genuine, as if she had finally begun to grasp the true magnitude of their dire situation. 3 jobs in the last 2 years, Robert finally admitted, his voice broken. I always found excuses. I always told you it was temporary, that companies were downsizing. He paused, and then he looked at me with those eyes that were once my entire world. Mom, I have a problem. I think I have a real problem. For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of something akin to compassion. My son wasn't just a liar, he was a man who needed professional help. But that flicker of compassion did not erase the betrayal. It did not heal the deep wounds his words, and his wife's words, had carved into my heart. Robert, I said slowly, choosing my words with care, admitting you have a problem is the first step. But I cannot continue to be your safety net while you do nothing to change. I cannot keep sacrificing my own well-being to maintain a life that is based on a foundation of lies. Valerie stood up abruptly, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her expensive red dress. This is ridiculous, Shirley. You're his mother. Mothers do not abandon their children. My mother would never do this to me. The arrogance had returned to her voice, a familiar defensive armor. Your mother has never had to deal with a situation like this because you have never told her the truth about your lives, I replied with an icy calm. And you are right about one thing, Valerie. Mothers do not abandon their children. But I am not abandoning my son. I am stopping him from using me. Robert approached me and took my hands in his. They were cold and trembling. Mom, I promise I am going to change. I am going to get help. I am going to find a job. I am going to make things right this time. Just please, give me one more chance. I looked down at those hands, once so small and fragile, hands I had held when he learned to walk, when he was afraid of the dark, when he needed comfort after a frightening nightmare. Robert, how many last chances have I given you? How many times have you made me this exact same promise? He couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I had lost count of the number of times we had had this very conversation, of the broken promises and the crushed hopes. Your lease is up at the end of next month, I announced, gently pulling my hands from his grasp. You have 30 days to find a solution. After that, I will no longer be responsible for your housing. Valerie stormed toward the door. Let's go, Robert. I am not staying here to be humiliated by a woman who doesn't understand what family truly means. But Robert didn't move. Valerie, you can go if you want. I need to talk to my mother. His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard in years. And for a moment, just for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of the man he could have been, the man I had always hoped he would become. Valerie stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Robert's words. She turned around slowly, her expression a toxic mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated fury. You're asking me to leave? After everything I have sacrificed for this marriage? Her voice had become shrill, almost hysterical, and she gesticulated wildly with her hands as if conducting an invisible, chaotic orchestra. Valerie, please. I need to sort this out with my mom. Too much has happened tonight, Robert tried to explain, but she cut him off with a gasp so loud it probably woke up the entire block. No, I am not going anywhere. If you are going to grovel like a dog in front of your mother, you are going to do it with me standing right here. She crossed her arms over her chest and planted herself firmly in the center of my dining room like a stubborn, defiant statue. Besides, this conversation affects me directly. If she stops paying our rent, where are we supposed to live? In a homeless shelter? I watched the bizarre scene unfold with a detached sense of fascination and horror. In the span of a single night, I had witnessed the perfect, curated facade this couple had built crumble into dust, revealing the tangled web of lies they had been weaving for months. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Terrible, yet utterly impossible to look away from. "Valerie," I said finally, my voice calm and even, "I think you have said quite enough for one night. You have made it very clear what you think of me, and I have been equally clear about what I now think of the two of you. There is not much more to discuss." "Oh, yes, there is much more to discuss," she shrieked, her face as red as her dress. "You cannot just ruin our lives because you were offended by a simple comment. Families forgive each other. Families support each other." The sheer hypocrisy of her words struck me like another slap. "Families support each other?" I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. "Do you mean the way you have supported me tonight? Or perhaps the way Robert has supported me by lying about his employment situation? Or maybe you mean the way you have supported me by allowing me to sacrifice my own savings while you live a life of carefree indulgence?" Robert sat down heavily in one of the dining chairs, his head buried in his hands once more. "Mom, I know we've made terrible mistakes. I know we've hurt you in unforgivable ways, but if you turn your back on us now, we will literally have nowhere to go." "That is no longer my problem," I replied, the words coming out with a harshness that surprised even myself. "For 70 years, I have been taking care of others. I took care of my own parents until the day they died. I took care of your father through his long illness. I have taken care of you since the day you were born. Do you know when the last time someone took care of me was? When was the last time anyone genuinely worried about my well-being?" The silence that followed was deep and painful. Robert lifted his head and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face since he was a very small boy. It was that unique mixture of guilt and sudden dawning understanding that would appear when he finally realized he had done something very, very wrong. "Never," he admitted, his voice barely an audible whisper. "I have never worried about taking care of you. I always just assumed you would be there. I assumed you would always be fine, that you would always have the strength to solve all the problems." Valerie seemed to be losing patience with this emotional turn in the conversation. "Enough of the melodrama, Shirley. You are the mother. It is your responsibility to help your son. You can't just wake up one day and decide you don't want to be a mother anymore." Those words were the final straw. I walked toward Valerie until I was just inches from her face. And when I spoke, my voice was so low and menacing that she instinctively recoiled. "Never, ever, tell me what kind of mother I should be. I have been a mother for 35 years. I have sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, and my health, everything for my son." "What have you sacrificed? Your beauty treatments? Your $400 shoes?" Valerie tried to respond, but I continued without giving her a chance. Being a mother does not mean being a permanent automated teller machine. Being a mother does not mean accepting humiliation and disrespect as a matter of course. Being a mother means teaching your children to be responsible, independent, respectful people, and in that, I have clearly and miserably failed. Robert stood up abruptly again, knocking over his chair in his haste. "Don't say that. You have been a wonderful mother. I am the one who failed. I am the one who messed everything up. Yes, Robert, you failed. But I also failed by allowing it to go this far, by enabling you to turn into a man who lies to his wife, who lies to his mother, who allows the very woman who raised him to be humiliated in her own home." Tears streamed down my cheeks again, but my voice remained firm. Valerie had started to pace the dining room like a caged animal once more. "This is a nightmare. This is an absolute nightmare. In-laws are supposed to help their daughters-in-law. We are supposed to be a family." "Family?" I interrupted her with another bitter laugh. "When have you ever treated me like family, Valerie? When have you ever shown me an ounce of respect, affection, or even basic consideration? From the day you first met Robert, you have treated me like an obstacle, an annoying inconvenience you had to tolerate to keep your husband happy. That's not true, she protested, but her voice lacked any real conviction. It's not true? I asked, crossing my arms. Do you remember last Christmas, when you suggested it would be better for you to spend the holidays alone with Robert because I didn't understand your modern traditions? Do you remember when I offered to cook for your wedding anniversary and you said you preferred something more sophisticated? Do you remember when you criticized me for wearing my favorite purple dress because, in your words, women my age should wear more subtle colors? Each example I gave was like a small, sharp stab, and I could see Robert flinch with every painful memory. He had been there for all of those occasions. He had heard every single hurtful comment, and he had never said a single word in my defense. Valerie, I continued, my voice softening slightly, you never wanted to be a part of this family. You wanted this family to disappear so you could have Robert all to yourself. Well, congratulations. It looks like you are finally going to get exactly what you wanted. Robert approached me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, please. If that's what you want, Shirley, then fine, Valerie snarled, cutting him off. But don't you come crying to me when you realize you have lost your only son forever. When you are all alone in this old house, surrounded by your musty memories, remembering that you once had a family and you kicked them out because of your stupid pride. Her words were meticulously designed to wound me, to make me feel an overwhelming sense of guilt, to break my newfound resolve. And for a moment, they almost worked. The image of being completely alone in this house, without visits, without phone calls, without anyone who needed me, was terrifying. Valerie's words echoed in the dining room like a curse, aimed directly at my greatest and most deeply buried fear, loneliness. For a fleeting moment, the bleak picture she had painted took hold of my mind. I saw myself in this empty house, haunted by the silence, by the ghosts of grandchildren who never came, by the absence of Sunday phone calls, with no one left to remember my birthday. The silence between us was sticky and heavy, and I could feel Robert watching me, waiting, hoping for my resolve to finally break. But then, something extraordinary happened. Instead of feeling the cold grip of panic or despair, I felt a deep and profoundly liberating calm wash over me. You know what, Valerie? I said slowly, savoring each and every word. I would rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and humiliated. I prefer my musty memories of a happy marriage and a lifetime of honest work to living a life of new memories built on a foundation of lies and disrespect. Valerie blinked a few times, as if she could not process this response. Robert's mouth fell slightly open. He was slowly beginning to understand that his final emotional blackmail card had failed completely. Besides, I continued, feeling a new and unfamiliar energy coursing through me, I am not going to be as alone as you might think. Just yesterday, I received a phone call that changed everything. But the two of you were so busy plotting how to humiliate me tonight that I didn't get a chance to tell you. Michael Jenkins called. The name landed in the dining room like a nuclear bomb. Robert froze, and for the first time all night, Valerie was rendered completely and utterly speechless. Michael had been my boyfriend in college, the man I had planned to marry long before I ever met Robert's father. He was an ambitious, intelligent man who had decided to move to America to seek better opportunities, while I had chosen to stay behind and start a family. Michael Jenkins, Robert murmured, his voice trembling. The Michael from the old photographs? Your college boyfriend? I nodded slowly, thoroughly enjoying the expression of utter shock on their faces, the one and only. It turns out that after 40 years of building a successful engineering company in Seattle, after raising 3 successful children and losing his wife to illness 2 years ago, he decided to look up some of his old friends. He found me on social media, and we have been talking on the phone for the past 2 weeks. Valerie finally found her voice, though it sounded strangled and weak. What do you mean you've been talking? Her face had turned a sickly greenish color that did not suit her at all. I mean exactly that. We have been talking every single day, reminiscing about the old times, catching up on our lives, our fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams. And last night, he made me an offer that took my breath away. Robert approached me with hesitant steps. What kind of offer, Mom? I smiled for the first time all night, a genuine, heartfelt smile that came from the depths of my soul. He invited me to spend a month at his home in Seattle. He says he wants to show me the state of Washington, introduce me to his children, and that he has always wondered what would have happened if... I left the sentence hanging in the air, enjoying the absolute silence that had once again taken over the dining room. "But, Mom," Robert stammered, "you can't just go off with a man you haven't seen in 40 years. What if he's a scammer? What if he's lying to you? What if..." "What if, Robert?" I interrupted him with a surprising firmness. "What if he turns out to be a liar just like you? What if he uses me just like you have? At least with Michael, I will be on an adventure, seeing new places and being valued for who I am, not for what I can give financially." Valerie had collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. You can't be serious about leaving with a complete stranger." "Michael is not a stranger to me. He knows my dreams, my fears, my hopes because we shared them when we were young and full of promise. He knows I always wanted to travel. He knows I always wanted to see the Pacific Ocean. He knows I always dreamed of writing a book about my experiences as a seamstress. Do you know what the very first thing he said to me was when he called? He said, 'Shirley, I hope you have chased all of your dreams because you deserve an extraordinary life.'" Tears began to stream down my cheeks again, but this time, they were tears of joy, not sadness. "When was the last time either of you asked me about my dreams? When was the last time you cared if I was happy, if I had plans, if there was anything at all that I wanted to do with my life?" Robert tried to approach me again, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Michael sent me photographs of his house, of his garden that is full of orange and yellow flowers, of the breathtaking ocean view from his deck. He told me about his trips to Europe, about the books he has read, about the wonderful dinners he cooks for his friends every Friday. And do you know what else he told me?" Valerie lifted her head to look at me, her eyes red and full of resentment. "What did he tell you?" "He told me that a woman my age, with my experience, is a treasure. He said I have stories to tell, wisdom to share, and love to give. He told me that any man would be lucky to have my company, my conversation, my affection." My voice broke slightly as I remembered those words, words that had healed wounds I didn't even know I had. After I hung up that call, I sat in my kitchen and cried for an hour. But I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from sheer relief. I cried because someone had finally reminded me that I am more than just a mother, more than just a provider, more than a free maid. I am a woman with my own intrinsic value. Robert had gone ashen. "Mom, please, don't make any hasty decisions because of what happened here tonight. Michael might just be telling you what you want to hear. Scammers are very clever." "Stop it," I yelled with a force that surprised even me. "Stop trying to control my life. Stop telling me what I can or cannot do. For 35 years, I have lived for you. I have made every single decision in my life thinking about your well-being, your future, your happiness. For the first time in decades, I am going to make a decision thinking only about myself." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert had collapsed into a chair again, his head in his hands, sobbing like a small child. Valerie looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror, as if she had just seen a ghost. "You know what else Michael told me?" I continued, feeling my confidence grow with every word. "He said he had kept a photograph of me from when we were 20 years old, the one where I am wearing the white dress with red flowers that I made myself. He told me that all these years, especially after his wife passed away, he would look at that photograph and wonder if I had been happy, if I had managed to fulfill my dreams." Robert looked up, his eyes swollen from crying. "And what did you tell him?" I told him the truth. I told him that I had had moments of great happiness, especially when you were little, when your father was still alive, when I thought I was building something beautiful called a family. But I also told him that I had sacrificed so much of myself in the process that I no longer remembered who Shirley was before she was Robert's mother or Charles's widow. Valerie stood up abruptly, as if she had been stung by a wasp. "This is ridiculous. You can't go with that man. What are people going to say? A woman your age, chasing romantic adventures like a teenager." I looked her directly in the eyes and smiled with a serenity I hadn't felt in years. "Valerie, my dear, after tonight, what other people think is the very last thing I care about. After all, if my own family considers me inferior and mediocre, what does the opinion of strangers possibly matter?" Robert finally found the strength to speak. "Mom, if you really want to meet Michael, if you really want to travel, we could support you. Just don't do it out of spite. Don't ruin your life just to punish us. Ruin my life? I repeated in disbelief. Robert, don't you understand? This is not a decision made out of spite. This is a decision for my own survival. For the first time in decades, someone is offering me a chance to be happy, to be valued, to be loved for who I am, not for what I can give. I walked to the dining room window and looked out at the quiet street where I had lived for so many years, where I had raised my son, where I had buried so many of my own dreams. Tomorrow, I am going to call Michael, and I am going to accept his invitation. I am going to buy a plane ticket, pack a suitcase with my best dresses, and find out if it is still possible to be happy at 70 years of age. The weeks that followed that explosive dinner were the strangest and most transformative of my entire life. Robert attempted to call me every single day for the first week, leaving a series of desperate, pleading messages on my answering machine. I chose not to answer. I needed the silence. I needed the space to heal, to process the tectonic shift that had occurred within me. Valerie, as I later found out, moved out of their apartment and went to stay with a friend, leaving Robert to face the consequences of their shared deceit alone. For my part, I spent my days in a state of quiet contemplation and excited anticipation. I spoke with Michael every evening. Our conversations became the anchor of my day, a beacon of light in the twilight of my life. He didn't just talk, he listened. He asked me about my life, my passions, the small joys and quiet sorrows that made up the tapestry of my 70 years. I told him about my years of sewing, about the intricate wedding dresses I had created, about the intimate stories each client had shared with me as I pinned and tucked and stitched. It was a strange and wonderful feeling to feel interesting again, to feel that someone valued my experiences and my memories. "Shirley," he said to me during one of our late-night calls, his voice warm and deep, "I have been thinking about you for 40 years. When I married my wife, when my children were born, when I built my company from the ground up, there was always a small part of me that wondered what would have happened if I had been brave enough to ask you to come to America with me." His words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. "Michael, I thought about you many times too, especially when things were tough, when your father was sick, when Robert began having his problems. I wondered what my life would have been like if I had gotten on that plane with you." "Well," he replied with that deep, rumbling laugh I remembered so perfectly, "it's never too late to find out, is it?" The plane ticket lay on my nightstand, a real and tangible object, a promise of freedom. Departure. March 15th. Destination, Seattle, Washington. Michael had insisted on paying for the ticket, but I had firmly refused his generous offer. "This is my decision, my adventure," I had told him. "I want to pay for it with my own money." The money I had saved for months, by depriving myself of proper medication and decent food. The money I would now use for something that would bring me happiness, for the first time in years. 3 days before my scheduled trip, Robert showed up at my door unannounced. He looked terrible. He was gaunt, with deep dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, as if he had been sleeping in them. "Mom, please, we need to talk," he said, his voice so broken that despite everything, it still managed to break my heart. I let him in but maintained a careful emotional distance. "Where is Valerie?" I asked as I made coffee in my small familiar kitchen. "At her parents' house," he replied, sitting down heavily on one of my kitchen chairs. "She left a week ago. She says she can't be with a man who doesn't have a job, who can't maintain the lifestyle she feels she deserves." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Turns out her superior mother isn't so superior when it comes to helping out financially. They told her to fend for herself." I felt a pang of satisfaction that was not particularly noble, but which I could not help feeling nonetheless. "So, what are you going to do now? I've been desperately looking for work." "I have applied everywhere, Mom. Offices, restaurants, retail stores, construction, anything. I am willing to do anything." He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Genuine humility. "I have also been going to therapy. I found a community center that offers free counseling services." "I'm glad to hear that, Robert," I said, and I truly meant it. That is a very big step. The therapist has helped me understand a lot of things about myself that I didn't want to see. He helped me understand that I have been an emotional and financial parasite, not just with you, but with everyone who has ever tried to help me. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced this speech many times in front of a mirror. "And what have you learned specifically?" I asked, curious to see if there had truly been a change, or if this was just another, more sophisticated form of manipulation. Robert took a moment to answer, nervously toying with his coffee cup. I've learned that I never truly learned how to be responsible for myself, because you were always there to rescue me. It's not your fault, he added quickly when he saw my expression change. It is mine. But the pattern was set very early on, and I never made the effort to break it. I nodded slowly. And Valerie? What did you learn about your relationship with her? That what I felt for her wasn't love. It was emotional dependency. I liked that she was demanding and critical because it gave me an excuse not to grow up, to continue being a child who needed his mom to rescue him from every difficult situation. He stopped and looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I have destroyed our relationship. But I need you to know that for the first time in my adult life, I am seeing things clearly. And what exactly do you see? I asked carefully. I see a 70-year-old woman who sacrificed her entire life for a son who never once appreciated it. I see a woman who worked her hands to the bone to give me an education and opportunities that I subsequently wasted. I see a woman who deserves to be happy, who deserves to be valued, who deserves to chase her own dreams after decades of chasing mine. His words moved me, but they also made me cautious. Robert, I am glad to hear you are reflecting on these things, but words are easy. Real change takes time and consistent action. I know, he said, nodding vigorously. And I am not here to ask you to cancel your trip. I am not here to ask for money or for your help. I am here to tell you that I am going to show you with my actions that I can change, even if you are no longer here to see it. What do you mean by that? Robert stood up and began to pace my small kitchen. I got a job at a cleaning company. It's night work, and the pay is low, but it is honest work, and it allows me to live in a small room I rented downtown. I am also taking online classes to get a certification in accounting. I looked at him in genuine surprise. When did you decide to do all of this? The night after our dinner. When I got home and Valerie started yelling at me for ruining our financial situation, something inside me just snapped. I realized I was 35 years old and I had never been truly responsible for my own life. Not for a single day. He sat down again and took my hands in his. Mom, I want you to go to Seattle. I want you to meet Michael, to see the ocean, to write that book you have always wanted to write. I want you to be happy, even if it means I am no longer a part of your life. For the first time since the night of the dinner, I felt like I was talking to my real son, not the manipulative, dependent version of him I had known for so many years. Robert, you are always going to be a part of my life. You are my son, and you always will be. But I need you to understand that our relationship cannot stay the same. I understand completely, he said firmly. And I want you to know that I am going to work on becoming the kind of son you can be proud of, even if it takes years, even if by then it is too late to fully repair our relationship. We sat in silence for several minutes, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Robert spoke again. Will you tell me about Michael? What was he like when you were young? An involuntary smile spread across my face. He was brilliant, ambitious, and gentle. He had a way of making me feel like I was the most interesting woman in the world. When we talked, he would focus entirely on me, as if my words were the most important thing he had ever heard. Why didn't you go with him when he moved to America? Because I was afraid, I admitted, the truth tasting strange on my tongue after so many years. I was afraid of leaving everything I knew, afraid of failing, afraid of not being good enough for him. And then I met your father, and he represented security, stability, a predictable life. I paused. I don't regret choosing your father. He was a good man, and we had many beautiful moments together. But now I have a second chance to find out what would have happened if I had been braver. Robert nodded slowly. Do you think Michael has really thought about you all these years, or do you think he is just idealizing the past? Robert's question made me think deeply. You know, Robert, I have asked myself that same question every single night since Michael first contacted me. Is what he feels real, or are we just two old people idealizing a youthful love? I stood up and walked to the window, watching the garden where I had planted roses so many years ago. But then I realized that it doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Robert asked, genuinely curious. It doesn't matter if what we feel is nostalgia, idealization, or true love. What matters is that for the first time in decades, I feel alive. I feel valuable. I feel like a woman who deserves to be courted, admired, and respected. I turned to look at him. When was the last time I felt that way? When was the last time anyone made me feel special just for being me? Robert lowered his head, ashamed. I never made you feel that way, did I? I always took you for granted. I saw you as something that would always be available, no matter how I treated you. Exactly. And it wasn't just you, Robert. Your father, too. Toward the end of our marriage, he started to see me only as the woman who cooked, cleaned, and took care of him when he was sick. I stopped being Shirley and became just Charles's wife, and then just Robert's mother. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Michael, calling at the time we had agreed upon, as always. I looked at Robert, who nodded, indicating that I should answer. Hello, beautiful, Michael's voice said through the phone, and I immediately felt that familiar warmth spreading through my chest. How was your day? Interesting, I replied, smiling despite the tension. My son is here. Robert, would you like to say hello to Michael? Robert froze for a moment, but then he slowly nodded. I put the phone on speaker. Michael, I would like you to meet Robert, my son. Robert, this is Michael Jenkins. Hello, Robert. It is a pleasure to finally speak with you. Your mother has told me a lot about you. Hello, sir. Robert's voice was hesitant. I hope you understand that this situation is a bit complicated for me. Of course it is. And I am sure you are worried about your mother. That is a very mature response, Michael replied with approval in his voice. I will tell you something, Robert. I have 3 children, all of them adults, and it took them years to understand that their parents are complete people with their own needs and desires, not just eternal providers of support and resources. Robert looked at me in surprise. It was clear he had not expected Michael to be so direct, yet so understanding at the same time. Mr. Jenkins, Robert continued, can I ask you what your intentions are with my mother? Michael chuckled softly. That's a fair question. My intentions are to get to know the woman that the girl I fell in love with 40 years ago became. My intentions are to show her beautiful places, to introduce her to my children, to cook for her, to listen to her stories, and perhaps, if we both decide we want to build a deep friendship, or maybe even something more. And if things don't work out as you expect, Robert asked, then we will have had a beautiful adventure. We will have closed a chapter that was left open for decades, and your mother will have had a well-deserved vacation in Washington. There is no pressure, Robert. There are no unrealistic expectations. We are just 2 older people giving ourselves a chance to rediscover joy. Robert visibly relaxed. Thank you for being so honest, sir. Call me Michael, please. And now, if you will excuse me, I would like to speak with your mother alone for a moment. Robert nodded and walked to the living room, giving me privacy for my phone call. How do you feel after talking to him? I asked Michael once we were alone. I feel good. He seems to be a young man who is going through a moment of significant growth. That speaks well of how you raised him, Shirley. Children who never face difficulties never learn how to be resilient. His words reassured me more than I expected. Michael, are you sure you want to involve yourself in your peaceful life with a woman who has so much family drama? Shirley, my dear, we all have family drama at our age. One of my sons got divorced last year and moved back into my house with his 2 small children. My daughter is having a midlife crisis and calls me crying every Tuesday. My youngest son is struggling with a video game addiction that is affecting his marriage. He laughed softly. Family drama is a part of life. The difference is how we handle it. And how you are handling it, with clear boundaries and with firm love, and by always remembering that your children are adults who are responsible for their own decisions and consequences. That is something you seem to be learning to do as well. After hanging up with Michael, Robert and I continued talking late into the night. He told me more details about his therapy, about how he was learning to identify behavioral patterns he had repeated for years without even realizing it. You know what was the hardest thing to accept in therapy? He asked me as we drank a second cup of coffee. What? That it wasn't just that I was lazy or immature, it was that I had developed an emotional addiction to being rescued. Every time someone solved a problem for me, every time I was given money or pulled out of a tight spot, I felt a kind of euphoric relief. It was like a drug. His words hit me hard. And how are you supposed to break that addiction? By facing the consequences of my own actions, without seeking a rescue. When I lost my last job, my first instinct was to come running to you with a sad story. But this time instead, I slept in my car for 3 days until I got the cleaning job. You slept in your car? I asked, my voice filled with automatic maternal concern. Yes. And it was one of the most important experiences of my life. For the first time, I truly understood what it means to not have a safety net, what it means for my actions to have real, tangible consequences. He looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, during those 3 nights, I thought a lot about you. I thought about all the times you had to choose between your needs and mine, and you always chose mine. That's what mothers do, Robert. No, Mom. That's what mothers who haven't learned to set healthy boundaries do, and that's what children who have never learned to be responsible adults do. He leaned forward. The therapist helped me understand that by constantly rescuing me, you were unintentionally depriving me of the opportunity to grow. His words hurt me, but they also freed me. For years, I had felt guilty every time I even considered saying no to Robert. Every time I thought about putting my own needs first. Now I understood that my generosity had, in a way, been a method of controlling him, of keeping him dependent on me. So what happens now? I asked softly. Now, I am going to prove, first to myself and then to you, that I can be a responsible adult. I am going to pay my own bills. I am going to make my own decisions. I am going to face my own problems. And when you come back from Seattle, if you decide to come back, I am going to be a son you can be proud of. And if I decide to stay in Seattle? Robert smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine joy in his smile instead of manipulation. Then I will be happy for you. I will visit you when I can. I will call you every week. And I will live my own life, knowing that my mother is finally living hers. The day of my departure dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper promises of adventures to come. Robert arrived early to take me to the airport, and for the first time in years, there was no tension between us. He had brought flowers, a small bouquet of white daisies that he knew were my favorite, and a sealed letter. "Don't open it until you are on the plane," he said with a shy smile. "It's something I needed to say to you, but it's easier for me to write it than to speak it." During the drive to the airport, we talked about everyday things, the weather, the news, his plans for the week. It was a normal, comfortable conversation between a mother and son, something we hadn't had in years. There were no pleas, no drama, no guilt, just a quiet conversation between two adults who loved each other but finally understood the importance of healthy boundaries. "Mom," he said when we arrived at the airport, "I want you to know that no matter what happens in Seattle, this has already been worth it." "What do you mean?" "Seeing you like this, excited, nervous, happy. I haven't seen you shine this way in years." He helped me take my suitcase out of the car, a suitcase I had carefully packed with my best dresses, including a new coral pink one I had bought, especially for this trip. At the airport, Robert walked me all the way to the security gate. When it was time to say goodbye, we hugged with an intensity we hadn't shared since he was a little boy. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Have fun. Fall in love. Be happy. You deserve it more than anyone else in the world. I love you too, son, and I am so proud of the man you are becoming." Once on the plane, I found my window seat and opened Robert's letter with trembling hands. His handwriting, which had always been messy and rushed, now looked more mature, more careful. "Mom," it began. "During these past few days, I have been thinking about all the times you were a hero without me even noticing. When you worked double shifts to pay for my school books. When you sold your new sewing machine to buy me a bicycle for my birthday. When you pretended not to be hungry so I could eat more. When you stayed up all night taking care of me when I was sick. All those moments of silent love that I simply took for granted. Now, I understand that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It means loving enough to teach independence. It means being brave enough to let go when it is time. Thank you for finally loving me enough to let me grow up. Fly high, Mom, literally and figuratively. With all my love and respect, Robert, P.S. Michael is a lucky man to be meeting the most extraordinary woman in the world. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I put the letter back in my purse. Through the plane window, I could see the clouds stretching out to infinity, and for the first time in decades, I felt that my own future was just as infinite. Michael was waiting for me at the Seattle airport with a bouquet of yellow roses and a smile I recognized immediately, even though he now had more wrinkles around his eyes and his hair was completely white. When he saw me, his face lit up with the same genuine joy I remembered from our college days. "Shirley," he said when we hugged, "you are even more beautiful than I remembered. The days that followed were like living in a dream." Michael took me to see the Pacific coast, where, for the first time in my life, I could see the ocean stretching out to the horizon. He introduced me to his children, who welcomed me with a genuine warmth that moved me deeply. His youngest daughter, Carmen, said to me, "Dad hasn't smiled like that since Mom died. Thank you for bringing..."